Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of America First AI. I'm your host, Asia Branch. I am the founder of the creative studio, America First AI. I'm going to try to keep this episode short because I really just want to react to the latest Jubilee. I don't know if you guys saw it, but it was starring, Allie Beth Stuckey from her show Relatable. And I have to say, quite honestly, it was probably my favorite Jubilee. And jubilees that we see, it's always something political, it's policy related, it's about capitalism when it was PBD, and the whole time he was defending capitalism while not acknowledging the flaws of our current economic system. And yes, I am a conservative who believes in capitalism, but I don't believe America is that. But that's a conversation for another day. But again, that's what all of these are. And so I want to go into some of my favorite clips that Allie had in this Jubilee. And then I'll explain to you why it was my favorite, what I thought about it, and I'll obviously offer some commentary. I can't show all of the whole thing. Obviously, it's like over an hour, but I'll show you the clips that were by far my favorite. And I just want us to just kind of jump right into it. I don't even want us to wait. So I'm going to show you guys one of the first clips. I want to play the clip first, and then I'll offer some of my comments about it. All right. So here we go.
There are some people in this room that might identify as progressive.
Right.
That's sure. Progressive as a verb, I think I'm far more interested in, like an orientation.
It's like, I get what he was trying to do there by saying he wants to focus more on by saying progressivism as a verb is kind of a moving target. But as Ali said, it is. It's like, right, because if you never achieve progress in the eyes of the progressives, then the goalpost will keep moving. You guys just keep moving the line. Every time we do achieve some kind of so-called progress, the line moves. I mean, just think about it. Just a few years ago, I remember when Obama did what he did and made, and I think it was not even Obama, but it was the Supreme Court really under the Obama administration. I'll never forget. I was like 17, about to be 18 years old when it happened. The Supreme Court made gay marriage legal in the eyes of the law. It made it legal. Today, few years later, 10 years, right? 10 years later, what's happening? Now we're trying to get transgender rights. One would argue gay marriage should have been the goalpost, but then progressives moved the line. So she's not wrong when she says that progressivism is a moving target and he's saying it as a verb. Well, it's a moving target. Like, I get what you're saying, but dude, it's not a noun. It's not. It's always been a verb because that's what you guys pretty much do every time as far as the progressives, you guys being the progressives. But let's keep going.
Submit to you, and I wonder how you feel about this, that in his context, Jesus would have been seen as a progressive as it related to, if we're going to use modern labels, the conservative religion of Second Temple Judaism. He had a posture of, look, there are some things that have gone astray. There are some things that you've heard it said, but I say to you. There's a belief, progress is built into progressive. There's a belief that we can do better.
You see what he said there, right? Progress, right? That progressivism is viewed as progress. It's like, no, these are two different things. And you progressives made it that because one would argue that progress was the abolitionist movement. One would argue that progress was when all men in America had equal rights and protection and opportunity under the law. One would argue that was progress. But progressives moved the goalpost. It's not the same. And this idea that, Christ in the eyes of the conservative movement today would have been seen as a progressive. No, he would not have been. And Allie's going to explain why. I know it's one of those. I was watching it earlier today and I was talking at the screen. It's good content when you're talking back at the screen as if they can hear you, right?
Things can get better. Okay. And so there's a part of Jesus that I see had a posture as not a progressive, just as being progressive. Okay, so right. Thoughts on that?
Okay, so say every single person in this country believed that transgenderism was right, that homosexuality is right, something to be celebrated, believed in gay marriage, okay? Except for this one person. And this one person started saying, nope, we've got it wrong. We need to change what we're doing here. I know that we've been doing this for 100 years, but I don't agree with this, and I'm going to speak a different message. Would that person be progressive?
I didn't hear your thoughts on Jesus
So
there.
you were saying,
You see, now I can't answer the question, right? It's like she's presenting I guess you can say, a hypothetical situation where in America, maybe everyone in America believed that transgenderism is a real thing, that gay marriage is a legitimate thing, that pretty much every perversion that we have in today's society is legitimate. But one person goes around the country speaking out against it and trying to, speak out against the so-called norm in that hypothetical she presented. Is that person a progressive because they're trying to move the goalpost someplace else toward something else? Is that person a progressive? Now all of a sudden, oh, I didn't get your thing about Jesus Christ. And she goes on to try to, take it out of the hypothetical. But again, this is the problem I have with progressives. Again, this Colby guy, he was, sincere, I think, in his debate and in his engagement, I should say, and his engaging with Allie. It was genuine, I should say.
that I'm trying to understand your logic. You were saying because Jesus was saying something different than the Pharisees and the Sadducees, saying something different than the message that a lot of people heard at the time, that he was progressive. Really,
Yes.
what I would argue is that no, he was going back to what God's heart always was. When we see in Hebrews 11, for example, by faith Abraham, by faith Moses. We even read that by faith Moses considered the reproach of Christ more important to him than the riches of the Egyptians. So we actually see from the very beginning, it was always faith in Christ. In the very beginning, God's law was always about heart posture obedience.
Okay.
So Jesus wasn't bringing something new. He was saying, hey, I am the Alpha and the Omega. I am the Word, as John 1 says. We're going back to how it was always meant to be.
Okay, but he
Right.
was
So
bringing,
what is she saying? What she's pretty much saying that he's not a progressive. He's there to restore order, right? That if he is the law made flesh, that what the Pharisees are doing in society at that time is not what God's heart intended. It's not his initial intent. And so Christ is here breaking down these institutions that are so-called, preaching the scripture of that time. And he's here to pretty much bust that up and restore his natural law, restore natural order. So she's really breaking down this idea that Christ was a progressive. This is one of my favorite moments. I'm going to finish this clip and then I'll offer another clip and then I'll kind of just sum this up. Again, I'm trying to keep this episode short because it is just a reaction video, but I had to talk about it.
new things, and I feel like in a different context you would
Like
admit
he was
that he was
bringing
bringing
maybe
okay.
foreign things,
So
different things.
Leviticus, eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. Jesus, you've heard it said, an eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. He was adding. Okay, so there's not.
He doubles
I
down.
don't.
He
I
says
don't think
it's
that's a
about
doubling
the
down,
heart.
Allie. I think it is a progress of, hey, we live in a new world, a new time. Let's do things differently. So here's why I think.
I don't think so at all.
I agree
why
with
Like
you.
in
Yeah.
Matthew 19, for example, when he's asked about divorce, and Pharisees are like, yeah, what about divorce? And who's the wife in heaven? And all of this stuff, trying to trap Jesus as they did. He doesn't say, I bring to you something new. He says, oh no, have you not read that in the beginning, he who made them male and female said, the man will join the wife and the two shall become one flesh. He goes all the way back to creation. And Jesus says, I've not come to abolish the law, but to fulfill the law.
Yeah.
Amen. Right. So we're going to leave this clip there, but you see what she's trying to say there, right? She's pretty much acknowledging that in these moments that Christ has with the Pharisees, that he is not here to bring something new. This progressive that she's debating, Colby, he's trying to suggest that Christ comes and he adds on to the First Testament, that he's just bringing something new because society has changed and therefore the scripture needs to evolve. But the reality is that Christ doesn't come to bring something new. He comes to restore, right? Christ is the First Testament made flesh, right? He's coming to double down, right? To show, this is pretty much what Allie's saying, that he's here to remind them of what God's law is. And that's why in his exchange with the Pharisees, Christ, right, in his exchange with the Pharisees, he goes all the way back to creation to double down. This is what she was saying, that he is not a progressive. He's here to restore. Just the Pharisees didn't want to hear it, because if he were to restore to natural law under Christ's order and Christ's law, that it would break down certain institutions that it existed amongst the Pharisees. And that's the whole point that she's saying. And the progressives just don't want to hear that. There's one other one that I want to bring up here.
What's your name?
I'm Paul. Nice to
Paul,
meet
another
you.
Paul. Nice to
Yes,
meet
another
you.
Paul. Let's start, if we can, on what
Yeah.
your definition of empathy is.
Thank you for saying that. I agree. The etymology of empathy means to be in someone's feelings, whereas sympathy means to feel for someone, compassion means with suffering, to suffer with someone. But empathy literally means to be in someone's feelings.
Do you think that when God became flesh,
And
he
dwelt
took on and
among
dwelt
us.
among us, that he was taking on the idea of human feelings on some level?
Not
That-
the idea of human feelings. He actually did feel human
Yeah.
feelings. He didn't
Right.
just, he wasn't just in our feelings. He didn't just have empathy for our weakness, but he actually felt much of that weakness himself, which is amazing.
Do you believe that empathy may not be where we want to end, but empathy is definitely where we should start as Christians?
Okay.
That we as people have the ability to be able to start and think, if we are to love our enemies, if we are to love our neighbors, if we are to love those around us in our community, we first have to be able to feel what they're feeling. And if you look at the way Christ lived, he tried his best in every opportunity to first see where they were coming from, asking questions first, making comments later.
See, I like this guy to some degree, right? Because even though he's a progressive, the point that he's making about maybe starting at empathy but not ending there, like even Allie kind of agreed with it, where it was like, maybe empathy is our way of seeing it from the other person's perspective, trying to empathize with them. And it helps us, as he put it, to love our neighbors, to love our enemies. And I understand where he was going with it because, yeah, of course, you want to try, and sometimes you want to put yourself in the other person's shoes, where you can not just gain understanding, but want to support that person in some way, shape, or form. And you do see Allie kind of offer her insight on this. So we're going to let her talk. And then I'm going to get to the last clip because, again, trying to keep this video under 30 minutes.
Is that a possibility, that we start with empathy, but we just don't end with empathy?
Okay, I love that distinction that you said, that we shouldn't end with empathy. We definitely agree on that. Here's where I would probably caveat what you said. I would say we can start with empathy. So my argument is not, which you're not saying this, but just to clarify, that empathy is always toxic or always sinful or always bad. I think it can lead you toward kindness. It can lead you toward love, but it doesn't have to be where we start. I think that you can love someone, sacrifice for them, be kind to them, be generous to them out of virtue, out of a desire to follow Christ. You don't necessarily have to feel how someone feels in order to be kind. And actually, I would argue that that kind of love is a lot more powerful, because even if I can't understand someone's circumstance or where they're coming from, God calls me to love them and to serve them. Really, empathy doesn't have to have anything to do with that.
Well, we completely disagree. And
I'm going to leave that there because really the reason why I agree with Allie, I understand where the progressive is coming from. If you guys are interested, I'll put the link in the description for you. But the reason why I really, really agree with her is because empathy without truth can become manipulation, right? So in this segment, she really does explain in multiple parts, in multiple debates that she has with people for this particular prompt. She does explain that, in some cases, because we're trying so hard to empathize with someone's plight, we affirm some of their sinful behavior. So, for example, to avoid offending someone, for when you say, when you call out their sexuality or their sexual perversion, you just you understand their loneliness. So let's say, like, not even homosexuality, let's not even look at homosexuality or even gender dysphoria, right? Let's look at people who indulge in pornography, right? Because this is considered sexual deviancy, sexual wickedness, it's perversion, even when you're the person engaging in it, right? The person watching it, not necessarily the person shooting and recording and doing the filming. But that is at the same level as homosexuality in the eyes of Christ. So I could say to a person, I empathize with, your loneliness, and you're trying to avoid the shame of, hookup that comes with hookup culture. And so I applaud or approve your indulging in pornography because it's the best way to avoid hookup culture. Now that's me affirming your sexual perversion, which is engaging in pornography and masturbation. Again, this is sexual perversion, and I'm affirming your behavior because I empathize with the loneliness, or I empathize with the wanting to avoid shame in hookup culture, right? Again, not even taking it to the levels of homosexuality or gender dysphoria, but just something on that. And again, because we understand where someone's coming from, and you share the same kind of loneliness or the same kind of shame that they felt, you're so caught up in the shame that they felt and the loneliness that they're feeling that you're affirming the bad behavior. Obviously, there's definitely a way to do this, but the reality is that we have a generation of Americans who are addicted to these empathy algorithms, right? We have AI and all these social media platforms that pretty much soothe instead of sanctifying, right? That's the problem. And so that's the point that she's trying to make, that empathy is not, it's pretty much materialistic. It can shift, right? Because if you see a lot of the times with Charlie Kirk, for example, she even said this in her Jubilee. She even said that, people who assume that a person lacks empathy, they won't have empathy for that person because they didn't feel empathy. But if you root your service of this person or of a community in love and of subservience to Christ, that it is because Christ calls us to be of service, to love them anyway, despite their plight, even if you can't relate to it, to serve them anyway. And that actually brings me to the last point. And there's no reason for me to pull up another clip because it kind of sums it up on this empathy thing, right? Because it actually convinced me of something that I even said last week, and I was wrong. Last week's episode, I said that, I had no problem saying I don't like Black people or Black America because I think the majority of Black America, the culture is straight up the Negro class. And for that and that alone, I don't like Black America. I don't like its culture. I don't like the community because majority of them are not the Carltons. And for that, I wouldn't serve them. I wouldn't be of service to them. I wouldn't help them build business. I wouldn't do any of that because they fell victim of victim mentality and they served the Lord of Negro. And for that, I would not serve them in any way. And by watching this, I realize I'm wrong, right? I can't go around talking about, Christian principles and values and not service a community of people. I'm supposed to reject the sin, not the soul of the sinner, right? Still serve them despite the fact that I disagree with their culture, with their lifestyle, with how they behave. I can reject the behavior, I can reject the violence, the music, the culture itself, but still be of service to them. And that's what it means to move in love and truth, not to empathize with them, because let's call a spade, I do not empathize with them. And that's what she was saying about how empathy is flimsy, right? Because I can't put myself in the lifestyle or the plight of Black America. I may appear Black, but I wasn't raised like your so-called average Black American. I didn't grow up in the hood. I didn't grow up with, violence everywhere and influenced by culture and became very out promiscuous and violent and illiterate and pregnant as a teenager and can't speak proper English. I mean, that's not my life. That wasn't how I grew up. And I would be a fake and a phony if I tried to act like I was. And so for that reason, I don't empathize with them. I can't put myself in that. I'm not like you. And for that reason and that reason alone, I was like, I'm not helping you. But that made me no better than the people who said, well, I can't empathize. Charlie Kirk had no empathy, so I can't empathize over the fact that he was killed. I'm no better than that person. And that's what I got out of this. And it really did change my perspective. It was like, you know what, Asia, you were wrong. And I'm humble enough to admit that I was wrong. I can't be here talking about Christian principles and not uphold them. My job is to be of service because I am supposed to love them despite the fact that the community is riddled with violent culture, promiscuous, violent culture. Despite that, I am to love them anyway. I am to serve that community anyway. And that's one of the things that I love so much about Allie Beth Stuckey's Jubilee. Again, it's really because it was so different than all the other Jubilees. Everything is always so dang political. I mean, my gosh, you could have a conversation about cheese and that turns into a debate about tariffs. And you're like, oh my gosh, I just wanted to say if Monterey Jack was better than mozzarella. How did this turn into tariffs? Everything becomes so political. One can't acknowledge, where they're wrong. They're not humble enough. They lack humility. And I won't even lie, I can be guilty of that sometimes. Sometimes I'm filled with pride. I mean, look at the difference in how I was last week. I was not servicing Black America because they were majority were the Negro class. but I was wrong. And one has to be willing to admit that. And that's what I got out of this. It was actually valuable, something that I could listen and take from it, where I can apply it and really come to a place of humility and understanding and realize, Asia, you were wrong. And I think that's what most people should take from this. I think you guys should watch this Jubilee. Honestly, I think it is the best Jubilee that I have seen. I think you all should watch it. I'll put the link in the description for you guys. I think you should head over and watch this. Again, I'm your host, Asia Branch. I'm not going to sit here and say that I'm going to try not to offend. I'm not an apologist in that regard. If you're offended by this content, then this isn't the channel for you. I hope you engage with it in the comment section, even if you disagree. And for Black America, who probably watched last week's episodes, for any of you Black America who watched last week's episode and found yourself offended by it, the only thing I can and will apologize for is dismissing you, because that isn't Christ-like, and that's not what we're called to do. So for that, I can apologize, and I will apologize for just dismissing you because of the culture of which you live by. And I will serve you the best I can with the skills that I have, as I'm called to do, despite the fact that I cannot empathize with your lifestyle. But I will serve you because that's what the King calls for. And that's what you all should get from the Allie Beth Stuckey Jubilee. But that's my time, ladies and gentlemen. Make sure you like, share, subscribe. Make sure you're hitting the bell for notifications. Again, that's my time. God bless you all. And until next time.